The death of the deal. Why cheap is the most expensive mistake in 2026. The anatomy of the carrying cost trap. Welcome to the 2026 Forensic Real Estate Masterclass. Today, we are answering the ultimate question, cheap versus expensive. But we aren't looking at the price tag on the Zillow listing. We are looking at the molecular reality of the asset. In the old market, pre-2024, cheap meant a lower mortgage. In 2026, cheap usually identifies a legacy asset that is structurally and financially decoupled from the modern economy. 1. The insurance alpha audit. The biggest mistake you can make is choosing a $500,000 cheap home built in 1985 over an $800,000 expensive home built under the 2024 Florida Building Code. Why? Because of the insurance alpha. A legacy home in South Florida now carries a weather tax. Premiums that range from $12,000 to $18,000 annually because they lack SWR, secondary water resistance, and 2024 rated structural straps. The expensive home built with hardened engineering carries a $3,500 premium. Over 10 years, the cheap home has a $140,000 insurance friction that builds zero equity. It is a phantom mortgage. 2. The molecular failure point. Cast iron plumbing. When you choose cheap, you are often buying the end-of-life cycle of 1970s infrastructure. We are currently at the 50-year failure point for cast iron plumbing. A cheap home with original drains is a $70,000 forensic disaster waiting to happen under your luxury vinyl floors. The expensive home uses PEX and PVC systems with a 100-year life cycle. In 2026, you don't buy a house, you buy a cash flow machine. If the machine's friction is higher than its output, the cheap price was a lie. The death of the sticker price. In 2026, the most dangerous number in real estate is the asking price. Why? Because the asking price only tells you what it costs to acquire the asset, not what it costs to sustain it. We are seeing a massive decoupling in South Florida. Cheap homes, legacy assets are becoming unownable. When you see a house for $500,000, your brain calculates a mortgage. But as a forensic agent, I calculate the friction coefficient. If that house was built in 1980, it has a friction rate that can be 400% higher than a hardened asset built under the 2024 Florida Building Code. Choosing cheap is often choosing to pay a 30-year tax to insurance companies and utility monopolies instead of building equity for your family. The insurance alpha, the phantom mortgage. Let's talk about the biggest hidden cost in 2026, the insurance alpha. In the old days, insurance was a flat expense. Today, it is a molecular audit of your home's resilience. The legacy penalty. If you buy a cheap home with a 2012 roof, even if it looks good, you are likely paying for surplus lines insurance. In South Florida, these premiums are hitting $15,000 to $18,000 a year for standard single-family homes. The 2024 Code Shield. Now, look at the expensive home built yesterday. It features SWR, secondary water resistance, triple reinforced hurricane straps, and impact-rated fenestration that meets the 8th edition standards. Its premium, $3,500. The math, that is a $1,000 per month difference. In 10 years, the cheap homeowner has spent $120,000 more on insurance alone. That is money that didn't pay down the principal. It was just a fee to exist in a high-risk node. The cheap home has a $120,000 phantom mortgage. Molecular pipe decay, the 50-year failure cycle. Now, let's go underground. The second part of the cheap trap is molecular decay. If you are buying a home built between 1950 and 1975 because it's affordable, you are buying the end-of-life cycle of cast iron plumbing. Cast iron has a molecular lifespan of roughly 50 to 60 years in Florida's corrosive high water table environment. By 2026, these pipes aren't just old, they are failing. They are channeling waste directly into the soil under your slab. The cheap reality. You move in, and 6 months later, your drain's back up. To fix it, you have to jackhammer your luxury floors, move out for 3 weeks, and spend $70,000 to $90,000 on a full repipe. The expensive reality. Modern homes use PEX and PVC, which have a 100-year forensic lifespan and zero corrosion risk. When you buy cheap, you are effectively taking a high-interest loan for a plumbing disaster that the seller successfully avoided. The death of location, location, location. For 100 years, real estate was defined by 3 words: location, location, location. In 2026, those words have been replaced by bandwidth, latency, and connectivity. We are living in the era of the Silicon Coast. With the massive migration of tech hedge funds and AI-driven enterprises to South Florida, the buyer pool has changed. An executive moving from Palo Alto or New York doesn't care if a house has a charming backyard if they can't run a 10 gigabit per second symmetrical stream for their global operations. Cheap homes are often located in digital deserts, neighborhoods with legacy copper wiring. Expensive homes sit on Tier 1 fiber nodes. The difference in resale velocity between these two is staggering. The digital desert penalty. Let's define a digital desert. If I'm doing a forensic audit on a property and I see that the only internet provider is a legacy cable company offering up to 1 gigabit per second, but with a 35 megabit per second upload speed, that house is a liability. The problem, in 2026, 35 megabit per second upload is a bottleneck for AI integrated workflows and spatial computing, VR/AR meetings. The cost, retrofitting a legacy neighborhood with dedicated fiber is a private infrastructure cost that can exceed $25,000 to $50,000 if the city hasn't prioritized it. The cheap trap. You buy a cheap house in a beautiful, quiet suburb, only to find out you can't work from home effectively. You've just bought an asset that the top 20% of the market, the ones with the most capital, will never buy from you. The digital envelope engineering. An expensive home in 2026 is engineered with what we call a digital envelope. This goes beyond just having fast Wi-Fi. Tier 1 fiber symmetrical. We are talking about 10 gigabits per second upload and download. This is the oxygen of the 2026 economy. Internal grid resilience. Expensive homes are pre-wired with Cat8 or fiber to the room. This eliminates dead zones and ensures that every square inch of the property is a productive node. Smart grid integration. These homes are ready for the 2030 energy grid, featuring bidirectional EV charging, V2H, vehicle to home, and AI-managed power consumption. When you choose expensive, you are buying a property that is compatible with the next decade of technology connectivity as a liquidity lever. Why does expensive win on connectivity? Because of exit liquidity. In 2026, if I list a home that is digital ready, the average days on market is 14 days. If I list a cheap home in a digital desert, it sits for 60 plus days. The cheap home requires a buyer who doesn't work in tech, doesn't use advanced AI tools, and doesn't care about future proofing. That buyer pool is shrinking every day. The expensive home attracts the executive pool, buyers who pay cash and don't care about interest rates. By choosing expensive, you are choosing market velocity. The logistics of proximity, the bright line factor. Finally, we have to look at physical connectivity. In 2026, being close to the highway is a legacy metric. The new metric is proximity to high-speed rail nodes like the Brightline. Expensive homes near Brightline stations in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, or Aventura are seeing a 15% transit alpha appreciation. Cheap homes in far-flung suburbs without transit access are suffering from commute friction. As gas prices and traffic congestion continue to rise in South Florida, the house that is connected, both digitally and physically, is the only one that maintains its value. In this section explains why your 2026 home purchase must be a digital asset. We dive into why cheap homes in disconnected areas are a dead-end investment and how Tier 1 fiber and transit alpha create massive resale value. Topographic equity and the institutional exit. The rise of elevation alpha. For decades, South Florida real estate was flat. In 2026, the topography has become a financial heat map. We no longer just look at the neighborhood. We look at the LiDAR laser scans of the street. Cheap homes are almost always located in low ground nodes. They are cheap because the market has already begun to price in the long-term risk. Expensive homes, conversely, sit on high ground nodes. This is what we call elevation alpha. In 5 years, the difference in appreciation won't be driven by kitchen remodels, but by how many feet the property sits above the base flood elevation BFE. If you are buying cheap in a low zone, you aren't buying a home. You are buying a 30-year battle against gravity and rising actuarial costs. The BFE friction and the unfinanceable asset. Let's talk about the base flood elevation, BFE. In 2026, the National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP, and private carriers have updated their risk models. The cheap liability. If a house is 2 feet below BFE, your flood insurance isn't just an expense. It's a barrier to sale. Many banks are now requiring 20% to 30% down payments for properties in high-risk zones, effectively killing the first-time buyer pool. The expensive advantage, a home that sits 4 to 8 feet above BFE, is a safe haven asset. It qualifies for the best financing terms and is the only type of property that institutional investors, REITs, are willing to hold in their long-term portfolios. By choosing expensive, high ground, you are ensuring your property remains a liquid, financeable asset for the next 50 years. Institutional REIT standards. Why big money avoids cheap. Why does the big money avoid the cheap deals you see on Zillow? Because institutional capital, hedge funds, and REITs operates on predictability. They perform a capital audit before every purchase. They won't touch a legacy home with cast iron pipes or outdated roofing because the variable maintenance cost is too high. They only buy hardened assets built to the 2024 code. The secret: if you buy what the institutions are buying, you are securing your exit liquidity. When you are ready to sell in 10 years, you won't be begging a retail buyer to get a loan. You'll be selling to a fund that pays cash because your property meets their resilience alpha standards. The resilience pivot. Finally, we have to discuss the structural pivot. A cheap home is static. It's hard to upgrade its elevation or its core molecular integrity without spending more than the house is worth. An expensive home is already pivoted. It features elevated slabs, integrated solar-ready grids, and sustainable cooling systems. In 2026, luxury is defined by autonomy. Can your house run for 72 hours without the city grid? Does it stay dry when the street is wet? If the answer is yes, you have a resilient asset. If the answer is no, you have a cheap liability that is slowly becoming obsolete. The master verdict: which one would you choose? So, we've audited the physics, the digital infrastructure, and the topography. Cheap gives you a lower payment today, but costs you $150,000 in insurance friction, $70,000 in pipe failure, and zero exit liquidity. Expensive requires more capital upfront, but protects you with the 2024 Code Shield, gives you 10 gigabits per second connectivity, and secures your place on the high ground. In 2026, I don't choose cheap. I choose engineering. I choose resilience. I choose the future. At the South Florida Home Finder team, we don't find you a deal. We find you a capital fortress. The Forensic Execution Protocol, the psychology of the cheap addiction. We need to have a serious conversation about human psychology. In 2026, the biggest enemy of your net worth is the word deal. Your brain is hardwired to seek a discount. But in a high-friction market like South Florida, a discount is usually a risk premium you are paying to the seller. If a house is 20% below the market average, the market isn't missing something. It has already identified a molecular or topographic failure. My job as your forensic agent is to break that addiction. I'm not here to find you a cheap house. I'm here to find you a high-efficiency asset. Buying expensive at a fair price is infinitely more profitable than buying cheap at a perceived discount. The forensic inspection, your only legal shield. In 2026, a standard home inspection is a relic of the past. If your inspector isn't using infrared thermal imaging, sewer scopes, and LiDAR topographic verification, they aren't inspecting, they are guessing. The expensive choice. We perform a capital audit. We don't just look for leaks, we look for resilience gaps. If the 2024 building code requires a specific hurricane strap and the expensive house doesn't have it, we use that data to force a credit. The cheap trap. Most buyers of cheap homes skip the advanced inspections to save $1,000. They end up paying $100,000 in phantom mortgages over the next 5 years. Information is the only true currency in 2026. The exit first strategy. Before you sign any contract, we look at the exit velocity. Who buys this house from you in 2031? If the answer is only a person with a low-income loan, you have a liquidity risk. If the answer is an AI executive, an institutional REIT, or a cash investor looking for a safe haven, you have a capital fortress. The expensive home, high ground, Tier 1 fiber, 2024 code, has 10 times the exit paths of the cheap legacy home. In 2026, we don't buy for the move-in, we buy for the move-out. The 2026 negotiation, data versus emotion. How do we negotiate for the expensive home? We don't use feelings, we use carrying cost projection. If a seller wants a premium price, we demand a premium asset. We audit their energy bills, their insurance binders, and their digital infrastructure. If the expensive house has a hidden friction, like an aging HVAC system, we calculate the 30-year friction cost and subtract it from the price. This is engineering-based negotiation. It's how we ensure that even when you pay for luxury, you are buying intrinsic value. Final verdict. The choice is yours. We have spent 2 hours auditing the molecular, digital, and topographic reality of South Florida. Cheap is a 30-year tax on your time, your stress, and your capital. It is the illusion of a deal. Expensive, the hardened asset, is an investment in resilience, velocity, and peace of mind. At the South Florida Home Finder team, we have chosen our side. We represent resilience. We represent the high ground. We represent the future. If you are ready to stop buying houses and start engineering wealth, our team and I are ready to perform your next audit. The summary: engineering over luck. We have traveled through the molecular reality of 1970s plumbing, the insurance alpha of the 2024 building code, and the topographic equity of the high ground. We've audited the digital envelope and the institutional exit. If there is one thing you take away from these 2 hours, let it be this. In 2026, real estate is no longer a game of luck. It is a game of engineering. The deal you find on a low-ground, disconnected legacy home is not a bargain. It is a transfer of risk from the seller's balance sheet to yours. When you choose the expensive asset, the hardened asset, you aren't just buying a house. You are buying time, velocity, and peace of mind. The future of the Silicon Coast, South Florida, is no longer just a vacation destination. We are the Silicon Coast. The capital flowing into Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach is institutional, technological, and high velocity. This capital doesn't look for charming fixer-uppers, it looks for assets of resilience. The South Florida Home Finder team promise. At the South Florida Home Finder team, we don't just show houses, we perform forensic audits. My partner Chantal and I, backed by the global power of REMAX Presidential, are here to be your shield. We see the red flags in 10 seconds so you don't pay for them for 30 years. Our mission is simple: to ensure that every dollar you invest in South Florida is a dollar protected by data and engineering. If you are ready to stop guessing and start engineering your wealth, we are ready to talk. If you are a buyer, don't sign a contract without a forensic audit. If you are a seller, let's pivot your property into a resilient asset to capture the highest exit price. Comment resilience below or click the link in the description to book your 2026 strategy session with our team. Let's build your fortress together. Thank you for spending these 2 hours with me. Information is the only currency that matters in this market. Use it wisely. We are South Florida Home Finder team. We'll see you on the high ground. Nos vemos en la cima. By choosing to invest in the high ground and in 2024 standard engineering today, you are positioning yourself ahead of the largest wealth migration in history. You are building a capital fortress that will stand while others face the friction of obsolescence.